Welcome to Kambani Zambia TV, your home for fearless investigative journalism, bold analysis, and untold stories from Africa and around the world. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button, tap the like, and share this video to spread the truth far and wide. We dig deeper, ask the hard questions, and uncover what others won't. This is more than news. It's journalism that holds power to account. Let's get started. Disclaimer. The content in this video is based on publicly available reports, statements, and allegations. These claims remain unverified, and we do not endorse or confirm their accuracy. This video is intended for informational and discussion purposes only.
Okay, so picture this scenario for a second. It honestly sounds like the plot of a really tense political thriller, or maybe, I don't know, some kind of dark satire. You have a former head of state, a man who, led his country for years. He passes away, the flags are lowered, the nation gets ready to mourn, but then just silence.
And not the respectful kind of silence.
Not at all. No state funeral, no burial. Instead, you cut to 8 months later, and his remains are still in a funeral home in a totally different country.
Well, and this is the key part. His family and the government are locked in this massive, high-stakes legal battle over who actually gets to say goodbye.
It sounds unbelievable, but this is the very real and, frankly, pretty tragic situation surrounding the late former Zambian president, Edgar Lungu.
It is baffling.
And the reason we are diving into this today, of all days, is because the plot just thickened, like a lot. We're looking at a brand new report from Columba dated today, February 10th, 2026.
That's right. Just when it seemed like this whole stalemate might just, drag on quietly in the background, there's this sudden flurry of activity in the South African courts.
So our mission for this deep dive is to try and untangle this absolute knot. We need to figure out how we even got here, an 8-month delay in burying a former president, and we have to look at the specific legal arguments.
Right.
But, and this is the part that really got me, we need to talk about what happened yesterday. Because there is a twist involving a fleet of luxury cars and a timeline that just feels very suspicious.
It's a classic case of what you might call lawfare, where legal maneuvers and political legacy just collide.
Okay, so let's start with the headline news.
Sure.
What exactly happened yesterday, February 9th?
So the main event is that the family of the late Edgar Lungu, and this is being led by the former First Lady, Edgar Lungu, has formally filed a notice of appeal.
Okay.
And they filed it in the Supreme Court of Appeal, or the SCA, in South Africa.
So lay out the legal geography for us. What does this notice of appeal actually do?
Well, it effectively hits the pause button again. They're asking the Supreme Court to overturn a ruling from the Pretoria High Court that dates all the way back to August 8th, 2025.
And that was a ruling that said the government could bring him home.
Exactly. That was the one. It very specifically ordered that Lungu's remains be handed over to the Zambian government so he could be repatriated for a proper state funeral.
Right. So the High Court said, send him home to Zambia. And the family is now officially going to the Supreme Court and saying, no, we want you to reverse that.
Precisely. And they aren't just asking for a reversal. They want the court to dismiss the government's original application entirely. And this is the kicker. They want the Zambian government to pay all the legal costs.
Of course they do. But here is where I got a little stuck when I was reading the source notes. The timing of this filing is weird.
Weird is putting it mildly. I'd say it's highly conspicuous.
Because, looking at the timeline, the Supreme Court of Appeal had actually already given the family leave to appeal, which is basically just permission to make this argument.
Right, the green light.
Yeah, they got that way back on December 23, 2025.
Exactly, right before Christmas. They had the go-ahead. They could have filed this notice in late December. They could have filed it in early January, but they sat on it for almost 7 weeks.
Why? I mean, if you're that desperate to stop the government from taking your husband's body, why would you just sit on the paperwork for nearly 2 months?
That is the million-dollar question. Usually in urgent matters, especially ones involving human remains, you move with speed. A delay like that suggests one of two things, either hesitation or calculation.
And given everything else that happened this week, it's starting to look a lot like calculation.
It really is. You're talking about the so-called coincidence that the Columba report mentions.
Yeah, so what happened the day before they finally filed this appeal?
So on Sunday, February 8th, literally 24 hours before the family's lawyers went to the Supreme Court, there was a massive ruling by the Economic and Financial Crimes Court, the EFCC.
Okay, and just to be clear for everyone listening, this EFCC ruling, this wasn't about the body. This was about money.
Money and assets. A huge amount of assets. The court ordered the forfeiture of substantial property that belonged to Edgar Lungu's son, Edgar Lungu.
I was looking at the list of items in the report, and I actually had to reread it to make sure I wasn't, seeing things. This isn't like a seized laptop and a bank account.
No. We are talking about 79 vehicles.
79 vehicles. I mean, who has 79 vehicles? Is he running a car rental agency?
It's a whole fleet. The scale is just staggering. And it wasn't just the cars. The court also ordered the forfeiture of 23 properties.
And the list included things like double-story luxury apartments and a filling station.
Yes, a whole filling station. It paints a picture of a massive portfolio. The report says the defense claimed these were all gifts from Edgar Lungu to his son, but the court ruled they should be forfeited to the state.
Okay, so let's connect the dots here. On Sunday, the state takes away 79 cars and 23 properties from the son. Then on Monday, the family suddenly files the paperwork to keep the father's body away from the state.
No, we do have to be careful as analysts. The source text doesn't explicitly say the family filed the appeal because they lost the assets. There's no quote saying that.
Sure. Correlation isn't always causation. We get that.
But in the world of high-stakes political maneuvering, a coincidence like that is very, very hard to ignore. It looks like a counterpunch. It feels like a negotiation tactic that's gone nuclear.
It's like, you squeeze our finances, we withhold the ultimate symbol of national unity.
It really does feel like total war. Like the message is, if you are going to take the cars, you are definitely not getting the president.
Right.
And that changes the whole complexion of the burial dispute. It really suggests that the body is now being used as leverage in a much wider conflict between the Lungu family and the current administration of President Hakainde Hichilema.
Which is just, it's tragic when you think about the human element of it. But let's rewind a bit, because for a listener who hasn't been following every twist of Zambian politics, we should probably explain how we even ended up here.
Good idea.
A former president, unburied, in South Africa for nearly a year. How did this all start?
So you have to go back to June 5, 2025. That's the day Edgar Lungu passed away. He was at a clinic in South Africa where he was getting medical treatment.
Okay, so he dies abroad. Now, the standard procedure for a former head of state would be pretty straightforward, wouldn't it?
You'd think so.
Bring the body home, lie in state, big televised funeral, burial with full honors.
Correct. That is the script. And that is exactly what the current president, Hakainde Hichilema, started to do. He declared a national mourning program. The machinery of the state began turning to honor his predecessor.
But that machinery got jammed immediately.
By the family, they just abruptly reversed the plans to repatriate the body. They stopped the process cold.
And then they announced that they were going to bury him privately in South Africa, not in Zambia.
Which is just huge. I mean, to deny a state funeral is one thing. But to bury a former president in a completely different country, that is a massive political statement.
It must have sent shockwaves. It's almost unprecedented for a leader who wasn't in exile to be buried abroad by choice.
Absolutely. So the Zambian government had to step in. On June 24th, 2025, the Attorney General, Mulilo Kabesha, went to the Pretoria High Court and got an urgent court order to stop that private burial.
Basically saying, hang on, you can't just bury a piece of Zambian history in South Africa without the state's involvement.
Right. And that brings us to the core of the conflict. Why? Why was the family so adamant about keeping him away from Zambia?
This is the part that feels so deeply personal. According to the source, the family filed these affidavits, these sworn statements, from the widow, Edgar Lungu, and the children. And their argument was incredibly blunt.
It was visceral. They claimed that Edgar Lungu specifically did not want President Hichilema anywhere near his body.
Anywhere near his body. Wow. That is some deep animosity.
It suggests a level of political rivalry that literally transcends death. They argued that this was his dying wish, to avoid what they saw as the hypocrisy of a state funeral led by a political rival who they believe persecuted him.
Okay, so that's the family's argument. He didn't want you there, so we are keeping him here. What was the government's counter? Did they just say, well, we don't believe you?
Well, yeah, that was part of it. The state argued there was no credible evidence, no will, no written directive, nothing that proved Lungu opposed a state funeral or wanted to be buried outside Zambia. They essentially called it hearsay.
But beyond the he said, she said, they had a more, I guess, an institutional argument.
Yes, and this is the crucial point for anyone interested in governance. The state argued a point of principle, that regardless of personal feelings or political differences, the office of the presidency itself has to be respected.
Oh.
They argued that a former head of state deserves, and in a way, sort of belongs to, the dignity that's accorded to that office.
That's a fascinating tension, isn't it? It's really a question of ownership. Does a president belong to his family, or does he belong to the history of the country?
That is the central philosophical question of this entire case. The government is saying you cannot privatize the death of a public figure of that magnitude. You can't just take a former head of state and bury him quietly in a foreign suburb.
Because it denies the nation their moment of closure.
Exactly.
So these two arguments collide in court. Let's just quickly map out this legal tennis match, because it has been bouncing back and forth for 8 months. It's dizzying.
It has been exhaustive. So after the government got that initial stop order in June, the big showdown happened on August 8, 2025. A full bench of the Pretoria High Court ruled.
And the score was?
A unanimous victory for the government. The court ordered the repatriation of the remains. They said, essentially, send him home.
But obviously, that did not happen.
No. The family tried a different tactic. On August 26, they tried to skip the line and went directly to South Africa's constitutional court.
Straight to the top. Bold move.
Very bold, but it failed. The Constitutional Court dismissed the application and basically told them, you can't skip the process, go back to the High Court.
Ouch. Okay, so back to the High Court they go.
Where they applied for leave to appeal, permission to challenge that original August 8th ruling. But on September 16th, 2025, the Pretoria High Court dismissed that too.
So by mid-September, the family is, losing 3-0. High Court says no, Constitutional Court says no, High Court says no again.
It really looked like the end of the road, but they had one option left. The Supreme Court of Appeal in Bloemfontein, they petitioned them, and finally, on December 23, 2025, they got a yes. The SCA granted them leave to appeal.
A little glimmer of hope for the family right before Christmas.
Exactly. And that brings us all the way back to today. They got that permission in December, sat on it through all of January, lost the 79 cars and 23 properties in early February, and finally filed the official notice yesterday.
What an absolute mess. So where does that leave us right now, today?
Practically speaking, it leaves us in another stalemate. The filing of this appeal effectively pauses that repatriation order all over again.
And the body.
The body of Edgar Lungu remains in a South African funeral home. It's been there since June 5, 2025. We're approaching 9 months.
I have to ask, 9 months, that's a very long time.
It is, and we have to talk about the physical reality here. Embalming is an incredible science, but it isn't magic. There is a natural degradation that happens.
Right.
The longer this legal battle drags on, the less likely it is that there can ever be, a traditional open casket state funeral.
That is a grim thought. But it's a valid point. The delay itself might just make the state funeral they're fighting for impossible, essentially giving the family a victory by default.
It's a war of attrition, and you have to remember, the costs are astronomical. We are talking about top-tier legal teams in South Africa. The family is asking the government to pay, but for now, everyone is bleeding money on this.
And meanwhile, this must be a nightmare for President Hichilema's government.
Oh, it's incredibly awkward. Hichilema is trying to project this image of efficiency and good governance, but he can't even perform the basic state duty of burying his predecessor. It makes the state look, in a way, impotent.
The Lungu family is effectively using South African sovereignty as a shield against the Zambian state.
It's a masterful, if tragic, use of international law. It really is. And it sets a kind of precedent. We've seen disputes over burials in Africa before. Remember the whole tussle over Mugabe in Zimbabwe? But this cross-border element adds a layer of complexity that is totally unique.
So what happens next? Does the Supreme Court just hear the case next week?
Highly unlikely. The South African court rolls are congested. A Supreme Court appeal involves filing records, heads of argument, getting a hearing date. We're looking at months, not weeks.
Months. So we could genuinely be looking at the 1-year anniversary of his death with him still unburied.
It is a very, very real possibility.
Unless what?
Unless there is some kind of settlement. And this brings us right back to the assets. If the Lungu family appeals the forfeiture of the 79 vehicles and properties, which you have to assume they will, we might see these two cases moving in parallel, a sort of double helix of litigation.
I see where you're going. Could there be a deal? Give us back the cars and we will give you the body.
It sounds cynical, but in high-stakes disputes like this, everything is on the table. However, given that anywhere near his body comment, the animosity might just be too deep for a deal. This feels like it has gone past the point of simple negotiation.
It feels like a scorched earth strategy. If the family feels they're losing their financial legacy, the assets, they're willing to burn the political legacy to the ground to fight back.
That is certainly one interpretation. It frames the asset forfeiture not just as fighting corruption, but as the catalyst that is escalating this burial dispute into a full-blown constitutional crisis.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with something to think about. We've talked a lot about the legal arguments, the affidavits, jurisdiction, the luxury cars. But there's a human element here that's really provocative.
Go on.
It's about ownership. When you become a head of state, you give your life to the public. You belong to the history books. But do you forfeit the right to a private exit?
That is the question, isn't it?
If a president truly deeply hates his successor, does the dignity of the office override his personal dying wish? Does the state have the right to honor you, even if you explicitly said you didn't want them to?
It's the ultimate clash between the man and the monument.
Exactly. The man might have said no, but the monument apparently doesn't get a choice.
And right now, the monument is winning in court, but the man is winning the war of delay.
A heavy thought for the day. That's all for today's deep dive into the Lungu legacy battle. We will be keeping a very close eye on the South African Supreme Court and, of course, that list of 79 vehicles. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.